Hi guys, my name is Hlongwane. So this week, President Cyril Ramaphosa attended the questions for oral reply session, which took place in Parliament. And initially, I wasn't planning on following the story. I wasn't planning on watching the live stream of the session for my own reasons. But I actually realized that President Ramaphosa does not give a lot of interviews. He doesn't do a lot of sit downs with the media, with podcasters in general. He's got the weekly newsletter that he puts out, which kind of give an idea of his thinking process, especially recapping from events that happened in the week. But since the beginning of the year, we now know that in June, it's going to be an exact 12 months since the GNU was formed. So there's just been a lot that is happening. And I wanted to kind of get his thinking process or his headspace, considering all of these events that have taken place. So the questions, or at least the questions for oral reply session, is where Ramaphosa answers questions that are directed to him from the different members of cabinet of the parliament. And for this particular session, the focus is around infrastructure development. I think it's in line with this Operation Vulindlela, so just basically answering and giving updates there. International relations, there was also that focus, as well as social inequality, that was also on the table. BEE as well was also on the table. And for the purpose of this video, in terms of two areas that I want to focus on to give my commentary on, taking from the way that Ramaphosa responded to these particular questions. One, it's on BEE. I think it's about time that I kind of give my perspective or my thoughts on BEE. And the other point will also just be to tackle the issue of inequality, race classification. Why are we still relying on race classification in 2025? Is it necessary in all of that? Starting off with the BEE question, which was posed by the leader of the VF Plus, Dr. Krone Mulder.
I want to say that if you look at the World Bank's report, it clearly indicates that the average growth at the moment for developing countries is around 4%. If you look at the top 10 African countries, the growth rates there vary between the lowest 5.9% to 7.9%. Even in terms of all the things that you have now mentioned this afternoon, your own Minister of Finance in the budget last week indicated that our current growth rate is 1.4, hopefully next year 1.6, despite all the programs, hopefully in the year thereafter 1.8%. Our unemployment is 32%. Something is wrong. There's a huge problem. And the problem, Honourable President, is that all the issues that you mentioned and all the wonderful programs and the investments, as far as I'm concerned, are based on the current economic policy of government, the underlying economic policy. Now, that's why I asked the question specifically, are you prepared to take the initiative and to take the necessary steps to amend, to develop an economic policy that can make possible real economic growth in South Africa, because that's what we need. If we don't have real economic growth, none of the programs that you've mentioned will be successful, none of them will be implemented. But that real new economic policy, as far as I'm concerned, needs to take a different approach with regard to certain basic things that I don't know if you're prepared to do that with regard to black economic empowerment, with regard to equity, employment equity.
Thank you. I'm rather surprised and taken aback when I hear that policies of black economic empowerment militate against the growth of our economy. That I find quite surprising. I am really baffled. I'm baffled by people who still hanker for policies of the past. And to have you, sir, saying black economic empowerment is holding our economy back goes completely against even what the World Bank says.
So the reason why BE is being questioned, and not just by people like Krone Mulder, it's being questioned and it's a debate, actually, a topic of debate in many forums. And I think what Ramaphosa is missing is a very important point here, and that is South Africa is not growing. We are having a serious problem when it comes to economic growth, prosperity, and all of those things. And the reason why BEE is then linked to lack of growth is because if you think about the tender portion, which obviously BEE supports or aids the tender system in terms of where tenders go, government tenders go, there has been a lot of wastage in that regard. And all of this is in the news. It's there for everyone to see. So it is just natural that people begin to start looking at these government policies and asking questions, right? Because now there is no growth. So the natural reaction is that people begin to even resent these policies. The more that they question, the more that they start to see the failures that are coming up, the more that people begin to have a lot of resentment. It's totally different when people are in a more different state of mind, when people feel like they're getting returned for their income, when we are not in a situation where the value of the money we're earning is decreasing every single year. You've got a complete different situation in that case, because people would be more than happy to support policies like the BEE. Just to give you guys a quick recap of the key focus areas, according to the government website, of what BEE is intended to achieve, right? BEE is set out to increase Black ownership in business. It's set out to ensure that Black individuals hold positions of leadership and decision-making, investing in the training and development of Black employees, supporting the growth and development of Black-owned businesses, promoting initiatives that benefit the broader community, particularly Black communities. That's the intention of BEE, right? Now the question is, why has BEE failed? Why is BEE in the spotlight? And I think it's simple. It's the lack of being able to get to the grassroots, right? Being able to benefit people who are at the grassroots level. And these are people who are either having low to no skills at all, no form of tertiary education, and even in some instances, basic education is either non-existent or not of good quality. These are people who would mostly be young people, so they don't have exposure, they don't have experience between that, 18 to 25 year gap, right? This is why BEE has failed, because now you've got a larger portion of your population who is not benefiting. Big problem, because now you've got this massive backlog. Now, on the other hand, BEE, for people who praise it, for people who say, no, BEE has done something. You know, there has been progress as a result of BEE. What's actually happened is that BEE has created like this concentrated group, this concentrated block, I would say, right? And in this block, you find high corruption, because the process of BEE is prone to corruption. If you look at all the reports and how it happens, if you understand sort of the state capture and the MO there, BEE was a vehicle in terms of creating this corruption that we see today. Hence, just another thing when it comes to governments, and so especially governments that are more socialism focused, is that the ideas and it just all sounds so good, but the implementation is just scary. So in my mind, when I think about it now in retrospect, because obviously now you're just reflecting on all of these things, it was bound to happen. Hence, if you look at sort of the conversation on BEE now, there's a lot of ideas that are coming on the table where people are saying, no, maybe let's look at BEE from first prioritizing the need for someone to get these priorities, to get this sort of a step up and all of that, as opposed to using skin color. And it's also quite simple to understand why ideas of focusing on need and not skin color when it comes to things like BEE, employment equity, and so forth, why that has not been welcomed. In fact, Ramaphosa does not even touch on that as a potential path to still keep the BEE Act. It's simple. The ANC gets a lot of power from the benefits that people get through these types of acts. When they know that if they have close proximity to government leaders, they have priority when it comes to tenders. So there's a lot of benefits that come with these types of policies for people who are close to the ANC. We see this time and time again. And the ANC gets a lot of support from that, because the moment the money dries out, the likelihood is that a lot of people will just turn their backs, right? You also have the character of Dintswalo, who Ramaphosa put on the map last year, telling us about Dintswalo, who's gone through the system because of the ANC, making sure that there's enough funding, getting through university. A lot of people say, I'm in a job now, I got through NSFAS, I got through university because of the ANC, and that alone gives the ANC so much support. So there is a lot of that in terms of why we are not seeing different ways of approaching this, because now it's clear that what's happening now is not working, because so many people are still left out and not really benefiting. But because this bloc that is benefiting is basically what's holding the power together. They're the ones that are hitting the ground, mobilizing, campaigning. And when they turn their backs, if they're not benefiting anymore, the ANC could literally lose a lot of support. But what I would say to these types of people that exist in this block is that 2 words: broader society. A government exists to benefit the broader society. So it's not just about looking at yourself and what you have achieved, because what is the point of having 14% of the population being taxpayers, working, earning an income, and all of that, and then you've got a whole other large portion of the population that is not economically active. That's why we've got all of these problems. And then addressing questions around inequality, race classification. This was a question that was brought forward by the leader of the ACDP.
It is not correct that after 30 years of democracy, you still have on paper a racial classification, because it makes those who know they are African, as you just said, but they are not treated as Africans. Maybe because they're not dark enough. This has to be corrected. You cannot tell me, Mr. President, that you are not smart enough to can come with another idea rather than race classification. I understand that there is a challenge, there is a problem that has to be addressed, and government is trying to use that. But are you saying to me that the apartheid people, the apartheid government, was more intelligent than you? That they came up with that racial classification? You have to repeat what they said, because you don't have another idea. So I'm pleading with you. You are smart, we know that.
Honorable member, Honorable Meshwe, that yes, we are still dogged by the classification of the past. And as it is, to rid ourselves of that form of classification, we do need to take steps to say this group and that group and that group were previously disadvantaged. And we therefore have to take steps to ensure that they are put in a better position when it comes to a whole range of areas, ownership, employment, and so forth. Because if we don't do that, then it basically means that we are accepting that everything is equalized when we know very well that it isn't.
So for me, Ramaphosa's response to this question suggests that he thinks what is more important is to first get the equality of outcome right. In order for us to address the injustices of the past, in order for us to eventually get to a point where we don't have to have race classification, we first need to achieve an equality of outcome where we all are rich, we are all driving a Maserati, we are all living in high-end apartments in Sandton in Cape Town, and we all have money, right? That's what I'm getting. And of course, it's definitely ideology speak at the same time, because, you know, Ramaphosa does come from the left side of the spectrum. Very, really problematic for me, because what this idea or this, ambition of saying you want equality of outcome, what this does is it neglects human nature completely. And this is a fundamental point to state, because human nature says we are all not the same. We are not all ambitious at the same level. Some people are lazy, some are not. Some people are very driven, some are not. Some people are willing to put in the hours and work till late to get something done. Some people want to sleep at 8 and they don't want to. So how can we have an equality of outcome if that is what he is using as a benchmark to say, if we do not get the equality of outcome, we will continue having race classification? But it will never happen. There will never be a situation where we've got equality of outcome. We are not the same. We do not operate at the same level, in the same capacity. What we should be hearing from a responsible leader, if Ramaphosa was that responsible leader, what we should be hearing is equality of opportunity, which says in South Africa, whoever is committed, whoever invests time and puts in the work, whoever takes the risks, whoever tries and says, you know what, I'm going to put everything on the table, I'm going to try. There should be absolutely nothing holding that person back. Not their skin color, not their gender, not the creed. That is what equality of opportunity says. It says we are all equal in terms of what we can achieve. South Africa should be an environment that allows for that. And just this distinction, guys, it makes a huge difference, because now you are not trying to control who gets what. Instead, you're just saying, as a government, I need to make sure people are safe. I need to make sure across the board, education is decent quality. good hospitals. And that's obviously the hard part, right? That's where government tends to just shy away from that, because that's where then they need to put in the work. Another risk that Ramaphosa needs to understand to holding on to race classifications, right, is that, race classifications over meritocracy, I know this debate does tend to come up, is that you just never know where good skills come from. You never know where great ideas lie. So if your viewpoint is that it has to be someone of this color, you will lose a lot of talented people. They're going to go to other countries. You're just going to demoralize excellent people who've got excellent and great ideas. Just some simple examples, right? Some popular names in terms of the business world. We've got Mark Shuttleworth, we've got Elon Musk. Both of these two people are born in South Africa, raised in South Africa to some extent, but they are big and prominent figures in the global space, in the global economy, right? Which just does not directly benefit South Africa. Why? For their own reasons, they found environments elsewhere to run their businesses. But who is to say that South Africa was not an option? Who is to say South Africa was not a consideration? But now, if you have all of these laws, all of these race classification, all of these policies, obviously that does hinder away investment. But now we have to understand that millionaires like Elon Musk, like Mark Shuttleworth, I know Jeff Bezos often speaks about the fact that he does not own 100% of Amazon. He owns a portion of it, because now you've got shareholders, you've got people, partners, and all of that. From one millionaire starting a business, starting something that is really cool and major, that can bring about more millionaires, right? Which is where Black people benefit. They benefit from growth. So embracing millionaires brings about more millionaires. And what I will say, it has taken me a bit of time personally as well, just to understand, is that everything needs time. Like, you could have a situation where in South Africa today, like he's talking about, people who own the means of production are this particular person. But if you do the right thing over and over again, in time, that could completely turn around. It could completely reverse. Because now you've got Black people playing a big role in corporate, the seniors and all of that. Tomorrow, you will have Black people becoming excellent entrepreneurs, because that development, that growth, a lot of people acknowledge the fact that for most of us, I'm probably the first person in my family to have a degree. So we are a generation of firsts in many areas, which means that it is going to take time. The development is going to take time. So there is no amount of social engineering that is going to speed this process up. We need to allow it organically to sort itself out, including embracing people who are skilled and entrepreneurs, which would also mean that this race classification is a hindrance to that, because people that are millionaires today are how we are going to be able to be millionaires tomorrow. That's how it works. We learn from each other. We grow from exposure, from looking at someone doing something, you copy that, you do it better for yourself, right? There is no amount of social engineering that can bring us to meaningful success, apart from just doing it the right way. And to wrap up, what I will say is that now this really puts a responsibility for us as South African citizens to really force our leaders to focus on meaningful solutions when it comes to dealing with these problems. Granted, these are very sensitive issues, right? You talk about past 30 years, no one takes for granted what has happened and where we come from. But I think it's time that we force them to start thinking about meaningful ways to be able to benefit, like I said, the broader society, not just a few 10% of the population who just so happen to be already skilled, already talented, and have close proximity to the government, right? Because that's not how you are able to effect the change. That's not how you move the country into the right direction. Gareth Cliff said something quite interesting during the Piers Morgan Uncensored debate, where he had a couple of South African people to talk about the Donald Trump thing and all of that. He said something to the effect of, when the ANC went to meet President Donald Trump, it probably was the first time that the ANC was treated like an adult, especially in a global stage. Because prior to this, a small country in southern tip of Africa, they're doing things there. No one really paid much attention until they got to meet Donald Trump. Because what happened in that meeting was that it was accountability time, right? It was accountability. Ramaphosa was asked questions. What's happening in your country? People are being hurt and murdered here and there. The crosses, the chant, all of these things were brought to the table. And to some extent, it was uncomfortable to watch because we realized that these people do not even take accountability for what they do in this country. It had to take a leader in another country to sit them down and say, but what does this mean, right? And of course, after that meeting, Ramaphosa comes back. I saw him laughing, giggling, telling the story, which means it hasn't really sunk in. Then we need to be the ones that treat the ANC like adults. We need to be able to force them, treat them like adults, even if it means pushing them over to the opposition benches. We need to start treating them like the leaders of the society. The ANC, they are leaders. They always say the JNU, we are leading, we are the ones. They must act like it. They must act like it. I find it so disturbing when Ramaphosa, whenever he speaks, whether it's SONA or even this question and answer session, where whenever he uses a benchmark, he takes 30 years ago. I'm like, even in business, if you work in corporate, you would know the way that business measures itself, it's the previous year or maybe June this year versus May in the same year. Because that's how you're able to effectively measure whether or not you are growing. Now, if you say 2025 versus 1994, you are going to miss the bigger picture, because it means that you're comparing yourself to 30 years later. So many things have changed, things have evolved. Then maybe there wasn't even smartphones, or I don't remember, but I'm just saying that this thing of Ramaphosa, every single time when he has to answer, he says, 30 years ago, what happened to measuring yourself to 2024? Why don't we look at the last SONA that you gave? What have you done since then? Because that's when you're able to connect the dots and pick up on these trends that keep affecting and bringing us to the same position year in, year out. I'm going to leave it there for this particular episode, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Where do you stand? Did you watch the Q&A that Ramaphosa delivered? What stood out? Where are you when it comes to these topics of BE and inequality and race classification? I know these are pretty sensitive topics, and I did try my best to be as cautious and as sensitive as I can in tackling them, but I think it's about time we start asking questions, right? To say, the way we're doing it, is it the right way? Because it's 31 years of the same playbook, and the results have just not been good, especially for the broader society, because that's what really, really matters, right? That's how we can see South Africa moving forward. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And also, please like this video, click subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. And pretty soon I'm going to be announcing more ways that you can show your support, if you can, for this YouTube channel. But up to this point, thank you so much for all the love. I see the messages and all of that. I see the growth as well. Really, really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you again next week when I drop the new video.